Hi there, Felipe here, a crazy creative designer from Germany, and today it's a very cool topic, I believe, something I really like to speak about, full of nuances and details, but I'm gonna navigate it as well as I can, and I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into it, and well, who knows, maybe it makes sense to you. I hope so. So, if you're asking yourself, no, I did not get into a bar fight as an exception. But I do have some allergies, and this helps me breathe a little better. Just look past it, it's like like it attracts the attention. I guess like a mole, but just try to ignore it. I'll try to do the same. So if you're new here, I would appreciate a like and subscribe. It means the world to me. Otherwise, I hope you can at least enjoy the video. So as a creative designer for a while now, creative director, I've been working with companies from all over the world and clients from all over the world, from Australia to the United States, and even from Japan, Singapore, Brazil, Germany, of course, where I'm based, France, UK. Yeah, I must have had like 30 different nationalities in the last 3-4 years, um, and it's very good. It's very enriching to have projects and clients from different cultures and with different languages and different time zones and with different particulars depending on their country, their location. And I always regard it as a very enriching and positive experience, which it has been indeed. I've had fantastic people from all over the world, and I do appreciate them very much, and I'm very glad to have met them. But today I wanted to focus just a little more on the most obvious use case that applies to me. I am Brazilian, right? I've lived half my life in Brazil. I grew up there, and now I'm based in Germany for a couple of years now. And my main channels are Brazil, Germany, and Germany, Brazil. And I wanted to, just delve a little bit deeper into the aspect of cultural design and cultural marketing, and make some annotations and make some comments about that, because maybe it's helpful if you're in the same situation, if you're dealing with people, with clients from other countries, or from other continents, or collaborating with other professionals. Then there are some rough seas to navigate here and there, which can be a challenge or which can be a reward, or maybe both, can be positive or negative as well. But okay, so little backgrounds. As I said, I'm from Brazil. I grew up in Brazil. I did school in Brazil, and then part of my time I studied in Brazil and here in Germany, and then from there I became a businessman, a business owner, and that's been mostly in Germany. And so I've been settled for a while now. I have many friends in Brazil, and I have many contacts in Brazil, and fantastic professionals over there. And a subject that always comes up is the topic of creativity, because, of course, as a creative designer, I connect with similar-minded people, with other designers, and with clients who are interested in this sort of work, or with collaborators from similar areas such as marketing, or tangents, right? Tangential, I guess, areas, or connecting parallel areas, where we collaborate and where we complement each other with our own expertise. But especially when it comes to creative design concerning Brazilian and German cultures. What I have seen? I have seen many stereotypes. What's cool about stereotypes? They're true to a very large extent, to a much larger extent than I had ever expected, and I find it a pity. I find it ridiculous of people to complain about any type of racism whenever you bring up stereotypes, or you're like, oh, the Germans are like this, or the Brazilians are like that. I think that's absolutely ridiculous, and you should get a grip if you're obsessed with believing, just talking, generalizing about cultures, or stereotyping cultures. is some sort of racism. That's ridiculous. So if that's what you think, I think you should leave the video because it's not going to be very agreeable with your mindset. But anyhow, I digress. Stereotypes have a root in truth. They're there for a reason, and they showcase how different our cultures, our mindsets, our mentalities can be. And what's funny is it's all geography. You are exceptionally different just because you were born a couple of miles away from each other. You know, it's strange, right? If you think about it, Brazil is around 10,000 kilometers away from Germany, something like that, depending on the region in Brazil. But imagine that, like little Felipe born in Brazil would probably be a completely different person if he was born in Germany, right? They went back to the nature versus nurture, blah blah blah. I don't want to get into that, but right, it's geography has determined my way of being to a very large extent, and that is true for pretty much everybody, right? And so, I've had personal and professional good experiences and bad experiences when it comes to dealing with each other, dealing with different cultures. And what I like about myself, if I may say so, is that I do have both mentalities quite ingrained in my mind. It's like Two-Face from Batman. Left side is German, right side is Brazilian, you know? Because of how I split my time and because of the different phases that I've spent in each culture, each country, and what I've learned and what I've tried to optimize from that, you know? Let's say, for instance, Brazilians, Germans are the classic stereotype. They're punctual. They're always on time. That's not true. Or that's much less true than I thought, than I expected before moving to Germany or before learning about German culture. It's much more rigid in places like Switzerland and Japan, for instance. You know, so it's not as ubiquitous and applicable as people think it is. So it's maybe, yeah, it is valued more than, say, in Brazil, indeed, by far. But by far not as much as I thought was going to be the case. And if you compare it to Brazil, here's the thing. Brazil is such a tremendously large country that people born in the north versus the south, sometimes they seem to sport completely different nationalities. So the farther the distance, the geographic, in our back to the farther the distance, the more potential there is to develop different mindsets and different stereotypes and cultures. Because Germany is much smaller than Brazil, I do believe you can find the Germanness in the north as well as in the south. In Brazil, it gets a little tougher, you know, if you compare the north to the south, or even if you compare Sao Paulo to Rio, for example. In Brazil, we have a saying, and we say that people from Rio, we call them cariocas, os cariocas. They are so lazy and they are so unpunctual compared to paulistas. Paulistas are people from Sao Paulo. I am a Paulista, was born in Sao Paulo, grew up in Sao Paulo. And there's only about 300 to 400 kilometers between those two. But the shift in mentality is huge. And we say in Sao Paulo, we call the cariocas, we call them lazy and we call them unpunctual. So we have very severe stereotypes of the typical carioca. And then if we compare the Paulistas to the German people, it's going to be another step up, you know? So there are levels to this game that are geographical on the one hand, but national on the other hand, and also transcultural as well, right? So throughout cultures, regardless of culture. So, yeah, so punctuality, that's one thing. Rigid, you know, rigidity, or let me see, what's the word I'm looking for? Or procedural. Yeah, procedural. That's, I think, a good word. That's what we call Germans in Brazil. And I have experienced that in Germany. I do pretty much every day, to a large extent. And so Germans, I believe, are much less chaotic, at least, than Brazilians. We're kind of like loose, you know. We're just dancing samba all day and we're just letting loose, as they say. Uh, while here in Germany, people follow, they're more structured, I believe, you know. And I think one of the best examples is if you're standing at a stop sign in Germany at 3 in the morning, there is nobody driving, there's nobody on the street. People still generally respect it, you know. They respect the power of the sign, the power of the rule, basically. Whereas in Brazil, you're like, oh, just fuck it. What is this shit? Not saying there are no exceptions. Of course there are. Of course there are. But if we are, you know, generalizing, which we have to, because we're talking about cultures comprising 300 million people in Brazil and 80 million people in Germany, of course you have to generalize. Rigidity, yeah. There's something in Brazil we call jeitinho brasileiro, and that's like the Brazilian way, if you translate it. It's kind of like a magic word. It's a code word for finding a way to solve problems pragmatically. I think that's the way to put it. Which is lacking here in Germany in most cases. What does that mean? It means that, let's say you apply for something in Brazil and it takes 6 months for the application to be processed, and then at the end of the day, there's like, I don't know, one input in the form missing. In Brazil, you would just go, oh, fuck it, you know, or just falsify it, or just add a little sign, add a little note or whatever, because the alternative would be to do it all over again, just for the sake of having 100% completion. I'm talking like about forms in general or bureaucracy in general, you know? So we call it jeitinho brasileiro, which is to find a little pragmatic solution or to believe there is one, even in the weirdest of situations. While there may be no flexibility here because, let's say, that's the way the guidelines are set or that's the way the law is, you know? So there is much less wiggle room, I would say, or much less room for interpretation when it comes to following a set of guidelines or mindset or rules, you know. And I've seen this, and it is true. It is indeed true. Please, once again, don't forget exceptions. Yes, of course, but in general, it is true. Totally. I like the German punctuality, for example, which I don't appreciate the lack of in Brazilian culture. So that's something, for example, that I believe Brazilians could do much better than I would expect. When it comes to my area, this is like the crux, I believe, of today's rant. I am in the creative area. I'm a creative. And I believe we have something special as Brazilians. We have a special essence in our minds that sparks magic in a way. Maybe because we've had to deal with it. Maybe because we have to deal with so many challenging aspects on a day-to-day basis that are difficult to fathom in more industrialized countries, that we've just adapted to every possible situation. You know, I think it's because Brazil has everything, a little bit of everything, which is why we have to be so adaptable and therefore creative in solving issues and problems. I think that's because Brazil is so multifaceted. Maybe it's one of the most multifaceted countries in the entire world. We have all types of climate. We have all types of resources, raw natural resources. We have all types of nature. We have all types of cultures. We have all types of colonies. We have all types of different languages and people. And, you know, so I think it's because of this huge multifacet in all aspects of your life. I think that's led the Brazilian to have to be more creative in everything. So we find ways to solve issues. And maybe those are horrible ways to solve issues, terrible ways, terrible results, but we still find it, you know? So like this little magical spark, I think what I have to offer as a creative designer, I believe deeply in my mission to make the world a little prettier, little tiny, more aesthetic, you know, make the little things a little more pleasant. I think part of the reason why I'm actually not terrible at what I do comes from my essence as a Brazilian. It helps me, it pushes me maybe, like the last 1% that I need sometimes to achieve creative mastery, regardless of situation or context. I think that comes from my Brazilian side. And on the other hand, I know how to implement and execute those ideas, which I believe does come partially, of course, from my German side, from my German knowledge. And what I say all the time is to embrace your uniqueness. And those are like two spheres. I try to find the best of two worlds. And if you've never done that, I can only recommend it, that you move to another country and you compare it to where you are right now. And you fine tune ways of combining either or both cultures or more cultures, because that's going to give you even more perspective. It's fantastic, you know? So yeah, I think that's it for me today. I hope the rant was not too much, and embrace your cultures, embrace your nationalities, embrace your birthplaces. It's going to make you even more powerful, even more, an even better professional and person. Because you can kind of like cherry pick. And I don't like the term cherry pick here because that has a negative connotation. But at this aspect, it's meant totally in a positive light. You can choose the best to become the best, which is what I try to do every day. So choose the best to be the best. I think that's, at the end of the day, that's my advice. So thanks for watching. I would appreciate a like. Hit the subscribe. It will be my pleasure, my honor to have you. And I hope this video provides some perspective and can help you and guide you in your further career. Stay tuned. Sad Exhort. Cheers.